Hey guys, wanted to go ahead and just do an overview of the multi-tools that I've kind of tested out and give you my thoughts on all of these. And this might be pretty much review for most people, but if you're new to multi-tools, it gives you kind of an indication of what to expect and to go from there. Before I go on further, I want to obviously let everyone know I'm not a tools person. I'm literally just a guy at a desk who looks at graphs every day, right? So, okay. So that being said, let's go ahead and go over the tools. So the first tool I want to talk about is the Gerber Slimdrive, or the Gerber Arm Slimdrive. You can find this for around $32. In many ways, actually, this is almost the perfect multi-tool for me because, so basically it's got a knife and it's got a screwdriver and it takes 1/4-inch bits. But the thing that sucks about it is that this isn't locking. And I remember thinking to myself, like, how nonsensical. Like, why did they not make this locking? But then I remember I was talking to some people, and I think it wasn't by some random decision. I think basically in the UK, but I might be wrong here, if you actually have a locking like screwdriver or something like that, like a locking tool, it's like kind of illegal to carry around without good reason or something like that. So I think what they're trying to do is they're thinking to themselves, like, because they could absolutely make this locking, but they chose not to as a business strategy because they didn't want to isolate, that part of the market. But ironically, by doing that, I think they shot themselves in the foot because there's a lot of other people that would have much rather preferred a locking tool. Can you imagine how great this would have been? So, and this is kind of what this video is all about, is that by the time this video is over, you're just going to get an understanding of what I think is a really great multi-tool. Because I made a video a few days ago about the Smithsonian knife, and everyone's like, what are you talking about? Like, that tool set is awesome and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but to me, it doesn't seem as useful. So I'm just going to go over tool sets that I find particularly useful. But yeah, in this case, you've got a bit driver, but it's not locking. And then in this case, you've got a knife here, but the knife is locking. You know what I mean? And it actually, the ergonomics are okay. And then I believe the other models actually have and then right here is where you press a lock in and you lock it. And the thing with Gerber is a few things. Number one, they hire good designers, right? So in general, they hire good designers and it's well designed, but the materials are usually made out of chintzy material, not particularly good. It's just kind of a theme with Gerber, but they're always so close, man. And it hurts because it's just like, you're so close. And honestly, if someone like Big Idea Design or James or or even this Smith company, if they made something like this, literally simple, just like a bit driver that locks like properly, and then like a good knife, like M390 or MagnaCut, dude, this thing would fucking sell like hotcakes. But it doesn't. So there's that. So again, I'm going to go over each of these and kind of go from there. All right, so the next tool I want to talk about is actually the Powerpint by SOG. And in many ways, I actually think this is almost the perfect multi-tool. I freaking love the pliers action on this. It's so perfect. It's so smooth. And I love how compact this is. But there's only one thing. Now, there is this thing where people are like, oh, it can hold a bit. But for me, that was never a selling point because you could just because when I actually used it, it's actually not that good for actually holding a bit here, ironically. But that's one of the selling points. But to me, the main selling point was the pliers. It's so smooth. It's so just, the technology used that they did for this, whatever patent, is brilliant. But the only problem with this tool is actually its side tools. The side tools are made out of this really cheap metal, and it's just really, you can just tell, like, it's like really shitty. Like, I hate to say it, compared to something like Victorinox, where their side tools are just high quality materials. And so I just feel like, I know it's easier said than done, but if they made a Powerpint, a SOG Powerpint where the tools were like at least at Leatherman quality or Victorinox quality, this would have been a perfect multi-tool. But it's not. And as you can see, we're already talking about two tools that could have been, but they're not. See, this tool would have been great if it was locking. This tool has amazing pliers, but its side tools are not as good. This would have been almost perfect, but it's not, right? So there's that. Next tool I want to talk about is the Gerber Dime. So I actually kind of keep this around because it's just like it makes more sense to keep it than not. But I never use this. I always find, but people swear by this tool. Now I actually had another one and it actually broke. So these aren't very fragile. But I mean, these are fragile, but like this is kind of in the league of like the Powerpint. Of this right here, the Squirt. But basically, it's got a good set of pliers here. It's got basically some. I always found that their side tools are kind of really fiddly to take out, so they're not really the best quality. It's a Gerber thing, right? But I mean, this is really handy to have. But in general, I just found it just is very it's very hit and miss. But I just find like I just felt like this tool right here, which I'm going to talk about later, is a better version of this tool all across the board. It's just basically the Squirt is better than this in my opinion. The tools come out easier. I just feel like it's a better tool. Which brings me to the next subject. So what's really cool is that this is basically, obviously small pliers, but also what I really like about this is that the tools actually are very useful, and they come out very easily. They're not like, I always felt like with the Gerber Dime, the tools in here, they kind of are a little bit more difficult to take out. These are more seamless. Everything just kind of is more seamless and more useful. It's just a shame that Leatherman decided, well, I know why they discontinued this model. They discontinued it because, and this is kind of what happens with smaller models, they tend to break easily. And so people would break it and then they would ask for like a replacement because, Leatherman has a lifetime warranty or something like that. And then after a while, they're like, shit, we're losing money on this thing. And that's why they kind of stopped building these things. But actually, I think this is actually pretty useful overall as a tool. And now, there actually is some Chinese knockoffs, which actually are, I would say, like, for example, the Alox whatever, which is pretty good. I would say a pretty good knockoff copy of this. But in general, I actually do like this tool. But ironically, I don't really use them that much because they're discontinued. I don't want to, so I just kind of like put it in a little tiny plastic bag because I don't want to mess it up. But honestly, if this was actually more mainstream, I would absolutely vouch for this tool. And again, we're kind of talking about tools right now that are like, that could have been, right? They all have different, like this, if it was more sturdy. This, if it had better peripheral tools. This, if it had a locking screwdriver. These are all ideas that I have on what would make a perfect multi-tool. But let's keep going. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is actually the Leatherman Bolster. So with the Leatherman Bolster, it's actually a really cheap, like one of the more cheaper models of the Leatherman lineup. But I actually like this because it's pretty minimalist. It gives you, in many ways, precisely what you want. It gives you pliers, and these are spring pliers. I actually got this from Costco, I think. And then in this case, now mine is slightly different, but basically it also gives you a knife. So in this case, the knife comes out here, and then it's locking. And then it also has, your standard stuff, but it doesn't have all the other stuff. Like it doesn't have the saw, it doesn't have it doesn't have like a lot of other things. And sometimes I feel like that's all you really need. You don't really need the other stuff unless you really need it. You know what I mean? But I felt like this is like the perfect minimalist tool. But it was just kind of like, it was for some reason, I can't explain it. It just didn't quite it just was never a tool I actually really used or kept around. It's just a little too bulky, you know what I mean? And a little bit too heavy. And but there's that. Next tool I want to talk about is actually the Leatherman Micra. So I bought this because it looks cool, actually. It looks really rad, and it looks really cool in kits. But I've started to realize as I've been using these more, the scissors on this are actually, they're not that good. And I would argue that the scissors these scissors here from the Victorinox Rambler, oddly enough, these actually cut better than this. And it's funny because this is supposed to be like Leatherman's like main thing. It's like the Micra, the scissor. But I think they're bested by like other tools. Like I think Rock Tool does it better. I think Flissa does it better. I think these guys do it better. Just like Leatherman just doesn't know how to do scissors. That's just a hot take, right? So, but I just think it looks cool from a point of design. But it's one of those other tools where I just never really used it, right? So, but it looks cool in terms of like conceptual design. Like I really like the aesthetic of it. Okay. Next tool I want to talk about is so this is the Leatherman Skeletool. And I got this, I hardly ever use this, but conceptually I thought, like, what's funny? This is actually really hard to explain. This is one of those tools where when you see it in pictures and when you see it in video, it just looks so conceptually cool. Because it's like 5 ounces. It's got a bit driver. It's got a knife. and it's got pliers. It just seems so perfectly minimalist until for some reason it's like, and I can't put my finger on it, it's kind of not. And I don't know how else to explain it. It's because what ends up happening is these bits are only compatible with the Leatherman bits, right? So you need to bring these other Leatherman bits with you or not. And so you're like in this weird situation where you're kind of like, do I bring it with me or do I not? But then if you don't bring it with you, then it's kind of like, what's the point? But then if you do bring it with you, then it's like, well, now it's heavy now. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of one of those things where like I can't explain it, but like I just never really got around to using it. But it was just one of those tools where like I had to get it, like when I saw it. But it was just, for some reason, it's not the tool that I would carry around every day. And I will be talking about the tool I carry around every day. But it's just kind of like, and then what happens is, in a weird way, well, if I'm going to start getting more hardcore and start getting, really need pliers, well, the problem is that there's better pliers than this, and there's better bit drivers. Like, I have better bit drivers than this, far better. But I also have better pliers. Like, I'd say the Knipex destroy these, like, left and right. I have better knives than these, right? So it's kind of like, it's this weird situation where it's not exactly something I would carry around. But then if I'm not carrying around and I'm reaching into a box, well, there's other options. So what ends up happening is that this just kind of like, and that's kind of like the theme of all these multi-tools. It's just that, I don't know how else to explain it, but it's kind of like, what I have on me is something that's easy. It's always on a keychain and it's useful. But if I'm reaching into a box, and I'm looking for something else, something that's better than this. And so I guess I'll now transition into the other tool. So the next tool I want to talk about is the Leatherman Curl. So the Leatherman Curl is just pretty much just like the Leatherman Wave in many ways, but it also has the bit driver at the end, knives and things like that. But what I also liked about it is it had some tools that were removed that I didn't really care about. So like, for example, it doesn't have a saw. Like, I don't really use a saw, right? But like, if I wanted to use a saw, like, I would get a saw, or I don't know. I know there are people that are in construction or whatever that absolutely do use a saw and find it extremely important. But for me, like, I just found like, the point is, this tool I felt was better than the Wave for me because it removed a lot of other tools out and only kept what I needed, which is what I like about it. This is kind of like a lighter Leatherman Wave. And these pliers are better than the ones on here. And so I found in many ways, like, I was like, oh, I gotta get that, But it just, again, I kind of ran into that other problem again, where in the end, this wasn't what I turned to in the end, because I found that I would just turn to Knipex pliers when I needed pliers. And when I needed a knife, I had a better knife. And then when I needed and the problem too is like, so these have those screwdrivers that actually, what it does, it uses the proprietary, the Leatherman bits. I can't pull it out here. I know it's in here. But anyway, that's how long I haven't used this thing. Oh, there it is. You know what I mean? And so there's this little slot here. If I can pull it out. And it actually does lock in pretty well. But right here, you can see, this is where you would put your Leatherman bits here. But I just found it's like clunky. It's just not as good. And I just have better bit drivers. So in the end, it's sort of like, I had to buy it because it just looked really cool. But in the end, I actually never really used it. And so I'm sure most people watching this is like, what the hell? You don't like anything. Maybe. You might be right. You know what I mean? But at least I'm explaining to you my thought process on each of them. Okay. The next tool I want to talk about is actually, I believe, this is the Victorinox Walker. So what's kind of interesting about this particular tool is that it's very minimalist. And you'll start to notice that's kind of a theme with me, right? So this has a saw, and then it has a regular knife, and like, that's it. There's not even a scissor on here. It's very basic. So if you are looking for like a saw, it's got a saw, and then it's got a knife here, and it's got like, I believe it has a combo tool, and that's it. And that's what I liked about the Walker, is that, because the problem is like, the Victorinox Huntsman gives you a ton of all these other tools, which I felt like I didn't need. Or it just goes, like, it gives you like stuff like, like the awl, which some people find useful, but for me, I'm like, I could do without it. You know what I mean? But like certain tools, I absolutely need to have it. But this just, if I ever wanted just like straight up, I just want a saw. That's the other thing too, is that with these multi-tools, right, that have saws in them, it requires you to bring this heavier multi-tool which includes a saw in it. But what about if there was just something that was super lightweight that just has a saw in it? So I just thought this was like conceptually just a better option. You know what I mean? And I actually, to this day, I still keep this, and I really do like it because I feel like this would be really good if you're hiking. You know what I mean? Like, just because I feel like a saw would be useful in like a sort of like a outdoorsy kind of area. You know what I mean? So I would say, yeah, I absolutely like this. So there's that. Okay. Next tool I want to talk about is the Leatherman MINI. This is actually one of those tools where I think is just really awesome. So the thing about the Leatherman MINI tool is that, you know, as you can see, it's quite small, but then it actually expands out further. So if you see here, go like that, and right here, now it becomes a full plier. I think this is great, you know, and for some reason, Leatherman doesn't do this anymore, but I actually think this is pretty conceptually kind of cool. And it's actually, you can't buy this anymore. It's discontinued, but I managed to get a pretty good price on eBay, and I'm sure you guys can still get this for pretty cheap right now, but I actually like this. But I feel like in some ways, I kind of like, this is kind of the same concept, but more modernized, right? It's like, but the pliers are, in my opinion, just much more useful, and they come out a lot faster. So, which is on the Powerpint. Again, this would have been a great tool if the peripherals were like at Leatherman or Victorinox quality. So there's that. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is the Leatherman Juice. I don't know if I've actually ever talked about this tool. You know, the funny thing is that like I always saw this in pictures, I always saw this in video, and I'm like, I had this mental picture of this being like the perfect multi-tool because it has almost everything I want in theory. Like it's got the pliers, it's got it's got scissors, it's got like a can opener, and the scissors are like pretty big, and like and it has a knife. It's just like, but it's not big, it's not bulky like, you know, something like the Leatherman Curl. But you know, the funny thing is that like in practice, like when I actually got it, there's a couple reasons why I was like, oh, well, there's a couple reasons why I just never got around to using it, which kind of defeated the purpose of it. First, because it's discontinued, like I can't really do much with it. So I'm like, well, I don't want to break it because like this is discontinued. But second of all, the implements are actually not as good as other things. It's kind of what my theme of other things. Like there are better pliers, there are better scissors, there are better knives, and this is still not something I would carry with me like all the time. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, but the other thing is, so they use a rivet system on this. And so when it has a rivet system, it means if this shit ever breaks, you're out of luck. That's it. You know what I mean? It's not like I would say some of these other tools where when it breaks, they can replace it and fix things. And that's actually what Leatherman, that's why they discontinued this tool, because in general, they just felt like, well, oh shit, like that's not making us money. Now that being said, I actually do think this is in many ways almost near a perfect size, but in many ways, me coming back to the drawing board, I actually do feel that this is still far more useful. You know, it's just because it's so streamlined. It's such a great set of pliers. But again, the side tools just really bug the hell out of me. But this is so almost perfect. You know, they almost nailed it. And I want it to be done where either someone copies them or they copy someone else. But these guys need to figure out how to make better side tools. And then the other folks need to just figure out how the hell do they make the pliers like this? You know what I mean? So, but again, I just feel like this in a way is kind of like, I guess this is I believe the Alox Farmer X or Alox Pioneer X. So this was actually conceptually, I thought would be a really cool idea. But then I realized this is kind of clunky, kind of heavy, ironically. And so, in the end, it just kind of brings me to my tool of choice in the end, which is basically the Victorinox Rambler. And this is the tool I use all the time. So basically, it's really simple. I mean, it attaches onto my keychain. It's got a screwdriver end, which is magnetic. And I don't know what it is, but even though it's small, this actually opens up a lot of like things. You know, it's actually quite useful. Then it's got a bottle opener, and I use this all the time when I open up like Coke, Mexican Coke bottles. And then the scissors here I use all the time. They're super handy. And so these scissors kind of are dual function for me. I use these to obviously cut up things, but also it's like kind of like this is the package opener. When you hold it like this and you go like that, that's your package opener. You don't need another dedicated package opener. You just go like this. You know what I mean? So there's that. And then it's got like basically a little knife here. I've used this to actually, it's funny when you actually talk to a lot of people and you ask them, what do you use a knife for? Like what do you actually use it for? And there's obviously whatever, but then for the most part, let's say, I use it to like cut up packages. I use it to cut fruits. I use it to cut bread. This is small enough to get the job done. Like I found like, I'll just cut something up like a sandwich or something, like if I need it to get done. But overall, this is like the perfect multi-tool for me. Not for everyone else, but for me, because it's so small, so compact. I'm not saying that this is the perfect multi-tool for everyone else. I'm just saying for me, it's handy because this is actually the multi-tool that I would carry with me all the time in my pocket because it's super useful. I've used the tweezers every now and then. I've used the toothpick every now and then. The toothpick I use is slightly modified. It's slightly like kind of like, a little bit sharper because it's, but yeah, that's all I got to say. Hopefully that was helpful to someone and we'll go from there.